first thing I remember is the sound of the waves. Deep, heavy, like the ocean was breathing right next to my ear. My head was pounding. My shirt clung to me with cold salt water. And somewhere above me, a voice was calling my name. Daniel, hey, wake up. Please. I opened my eyes to sunlight stabbing through the clouds. The air smelled like seaweed and something else. Burnt wood? I turned my head and saw her. Claire Whitmore, my boss. The woman who usually walked into the office like she owned the city. Hair perfect, words sharper than glass. And now barefoot, soaked, her hair tangled, standing over me on a stretch of empty sand. She knelt down, brushing wet strands from her face. Thank God, she said. And for the first time since I'd known her, her voice didn't sound like it was giving orders. It sounded scared. I sat up slowly, every muscle aching. Behind her, the ocean stretched forever. The wreckage of our company boat floated in pieces, bobbing in the tide. The suitcase, a broken oar, one of the bright orange life vests we'd grabbed in a rush before the storm hit. What happened? I asked. My throat was raw. She shook her head. Storm caught us halfway back from the meeting on South Point. Radio died. Then, nothing. She looked out at the wreckage, her jaw tight. We're lucky we made it here at all. The sand was hot under my palms. I scanned the horizon. No boats, no houses, just a wall of green jungle rising behind us and the sound of the ocean, endless and heavy. Claire followed my gaze. There's no one here. Her words hung in the air, flat and certain. We stood there for a moment, the wind tugging at our clothes, both of us processing the same truth. If we were going to get out of here, it would be together. And that was strange, because back at the office we couldn't go a week without arguing. She'd say I was careless with details. I'd say she treated every project like it was life or death. But now, here we were, two people who couldn't stand each other. Suddenly the only two people in the world. Claire took a breath, like she was forcing herself into action. We need fresh water. Shelter before nightfall. Her voice had that familiar edge again, but it was thinner now, like she was holding herself together with it. I followed her up toward the tree line, my shoes sinking into the sand. The jungle was alive with noise. Birds calling, something rustling in the undergrowth, the smell of damp earth and flowers I didn't recognize. Watch your step, she said over her shoulder, pushing a branch aside. I muttered, but she glanced back and gave me the smallest, almost amused look. It was the first flicker of something that didn't feel like survival mode. We found a small clearing just inside the jungle. Fallen palm fronds, scattered coconuts, and, thankfully, a trickle of water from a rock face. We started gathering wood and leaves. Every time our hands brushed, she'd flinch, like she wasn't sure if it was okay to be that close. Hours passed, the sun dropping lower. I caught her standing by the edge of the beach, staring out at the horizon like she was willing a rescue ship to appear. I walked up beside her. Hey, I said softly, we'll figure this out. She didn't look at me at first. Then she turned, and her eyes, tired, bright, and unguarded, locked on mine. The wind pulled at her hair. I'm not your boss out here, she said quietly. I'm just a woman who needs you. For a second, the ocean faded, the wind, everything. Just her voice and the weight of what she'd said. Then, from somewhere deep in the jungle, came a sound low, guttural, and nothing like the calls we'd been hearing all day. Claire froze. I felt my pulse jump. We weren't alone. If you'd like, I can also give you a matching thumbnail concept and pacing beats so the intro flows perfectly into the next scene of your YouTube story. The sound came again, longer this time, almost like a growl. Claire's hand shot out and gripped my arm before she even seemed to realize she'd done it. Her fingers were cold against my skin. What was that? She whispered. I don't know, I said, scanning the trees. My eyes searched for movement, but the jungle was still too still. We stood there for a moment, the surf rolling quietly behind us, the shadows of the trees stretching toward us as the sun dropped lower. Then the sound faded, leaving only the crash of waves and the rustle of leaves. Claire pulled her hand back, glancing at me like she wasn't sure if she should apologize. She didn't. Instead, she turned toward the small fire we'd built earlier and crouched beside it, feeding in another branch. It was strange, seeing her like this. Back at Whitmore and Company, she was the kind of person who could make a room full of executives go silent with one raised eyebrow. I'd been working under her for a year, mostly because she was the only person who'd taken a chance on me after I'd been laid off from my last job. She never mentioned it, but I knew she'd fought for me in the hiring meeting. She was tough, demanding, impossible to please, but she was also sharp, and when she smiled, which was rare, it felt like you'd been let in on a secret. That's what made this whole thing so surreal. This morning we'd been on the company boat, heading back from a client meeting on a neighboring island. I'd been teasing her about how she never let herself take a vacation. She'd given me one of those looks, half amused, half irritated, and then the storm had hit. Walls of rain, a deafening crack of thunder, and the sea lifting us like we were nothing. The last thing I remembered before waking on the beach was the boat tilting and her shouting my name over the wind. Now, here we were, drying seaweed from our clothes over a fire, watching the sky turn gold and violet. "You're staring," she said suddenly, without looking up from the flames. I looked away quickly, just making sure you're not about to pass out. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I'm fine. You're the one who took a wave to the head." We didn't talk for a while after that. The fire crackled, and the tide pulled in and out, a steady heartbeat. Somewhere behind us, the jungle made another rustling sound, but lighter this time, like something moving away. Eventually, I stood and walked to the waterline. The horizon was empty. The air felt heavier, cooler now. Claire joined me, holding her arms around herself. "You're cold," I said. "I'm fine," she answered, but her voice was softer than before. I took off my damp jacket and handed it to her. She hesitated, her pride almost winning, then took it with a quiet thanks. She looked out at the ocean. "You think they're looking for us?" "They have to be," I said, even though I wasn't sure. The storm had been brutal, and we'd been way off the main route. She turned to me then, studying my face like she was trying to read something in it. "You always believe the best, don't you?" "Not always," I said. "Just when the alternative's worse." She held my gaze for a moment longer, then looked away. The wind picked up, pulling her hair across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed it back. She froze at the touch but didn't move away. It lasted only a second before she stepped back, clearing her throat. "We should check the tree-line before it gets dark. Make sure nothing's around." We moved together along the edge of the jungle, scanning for signs of danger or hope. Every now and then, our hands would brush as we moved branches aside, and each time I felt her tense, just slightly. We found nothing threatening, but also nothing useful. No fruit trees close by, no sign of fresh water beyond the trickle we'd seen. By the time we returned to the fire, the sun had slipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deep blue and scattered stars. Claire sat cross-legged, hugging my jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Remember that first meeting we had?" she said suddenly. "The one where you told me my proposal looked like it had been written in the back of a taxi?" I asked. She actually laughed. Soft, quick, but real. I wasn't wrong. "No," I admitted, smiling despite the ache in my muscles. "But you still gave me the job." She shrugged, looking at the fire. "I saw potential, and I figured, maybe you needed the chance more than anyone else." Something about the way she said it made me want to ask more. But before I could, the jungle gave another sound, different this time. Not a growl, not a rustle. It was a sharp, deliberate snap, like someone stepping on a branch. Claire's eyes met mine instantly. "That was close," she said. I nodded, straining to listen. The night around us seemed to hold its breath. Then nothing. Silence. But the feeling stayed, the certainty that we were being watched. Claire shifted closer to me, her voice low. "Whatever happens, we stay together." Her words carried weight, heavier than the situation already was. Like there was more she wasn't telling me. Something about why she'd been on that trip, or why she was looking at me now like she had a reason to keep me alive beyond just survival. Before I could ask, the sound came again. Closer. And this time it didn't fade. "If you want, I can now map out the next act beats so we can keep the suspense, deepen the relationship, and slowly reveal what Claire might be hiding." The snap came again, crisp and close. Claire's hand instinctively found my arm, her grip tighter this time. The firelight flickered over her face, catching the sharp line of her jaw and the tension in her eyes. I rose slowly, scanning the darkness beyond the glow. "Stay here," I whispered. Her hand tightened. "Don't you dare." Another sound, branches shifting, low movement in the undergrowth. My pulse hammered. I took one cautious step toward the tree-line, squinting into the shadows. Something moved, not big but fast. Leaves trembled and parted, and for a split second, I saw a shape, low to the ground, darting away. When I turned back, Claire was on her feet, watching me like I just walked toward a cliff. "Well?" she asked. "Small," I said. "Not whatever we thought." She exhaled and rubbed her forehead. "We can't do this every time a leaf moves. We'll lose our minds." I almost agreed, but the truth was, I didn't believe it was just an animal. There'd been something in the way it moved, like it had stopped to watch before running. We sat back at the fire, the silence between us heavier than before. Eventually, Claire glanced at me. "You didn't have to go first, you know. I'm not helpless." "I know," I said, "but I'd rather it be me." She tilted her head slightly, as if weighing those words, then looked away. "Don't make a habit of that. You'll just get yourself hurt." I didn't answer, but her tone stayed with me. Somewhere under the caution there was something else, like she was afraid of losing me. By midnight, the fire was low, and the jungle felt alive in a way it hadn't during the day. Sounds came from every direction. Chittering insects, the creak of trees swaying, the distant splash of waves against rocks. Claire sat wrapped in my jacket, her knees pulled up, staring at the flames. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the boat tipping, the storm swallowing us whole. I also saw her, shouting my name over the roar of wind and water, refusing to let go. "You're thinking too loud," she said suddenly, her voice soft but certain. I looked over. "What makes you say that? You've got that faraway look. Same one you had in the office when you thought I wasn't watching." I almost laughed. "I didn't think you noticed." "I notice everything," she said. Her gaze lingered on me a moment longer, then dropped back to the fire. "That's my problem." I waited for her to explain, but she didn't. Instead, she reached for a piece of driftwood and poked at the embers. "Claire," I said quietly, "why were you really on that trip? You didn't need to be at that meeting." Her hand froze on the stick. For a second, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, "Maybe I didn't want to be in the city. Maybe I needed to get away." It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd ever admit in the office. In the early hours, I woke to the sound of her moving. She was standing near the tree-line, looking into the jungle. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, sitting up. She turned, startled, then gave a small shake of her head. "Thought I heard something again." Same thing as before? Maybe, she said. But the way her voice dipped told me she wasn't convinced. We decided to search in daylight. By morning, the sky was pale and washed out, the air heavy with heat. We walked along the shoreline, looking for higher ground where we might spot a passing boat. Every so often, she'd stop to adjust the strap of her shoe or pull her hair into a makeshift tie. Small things, but they caught my attention. The way she muttered under her breath when sand got in her shoe, the quick smile when I handed her a smooth stone to use as a grip for climbing. We found a rocky bluff that overlooked both the ocean and the jungle. From up there, the island looked bigger than we thought. Dense trees, narrow beaches, no visible sign of anyone else. No signal, no boats, I said, scanning the horizon. She nodded but didn't look at the water. Her eyes were on the jungle. Someone's been here, she said suddenly. I followed her gaze. A small section of trees at the base of the bluff had been cleared, not by nature, by hands. We climbed down to look. There were signs of an old fire pit, half buried in sand, and something else. A length of rope, frayed but still strong. Claire picked it up, turning it over in her hands. See? We're not the first. The words should have been comforting, but they weren't. If someone had been here, where were they now? That night, we stayed closer to the jungle than before. The rope coiled beside our fire. She was quieter, more distracted, and every time I caught her eye, she looked away too quickly. At one point, she said, "Daniel, if we do see someone, promise me you won't just assume they're here to help." Her tone was sharp, almost urgent. "You know something," I said. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the rope, running it through her fingers like it held some memory. "Claire," I pressed. Her eyes lifted to mine, and for a heartbeat, it felt like she was going to tell me everything. But then a sound from the trees. Not a snap this time. Footsteps. Deliberate. Close. We both froze. If you want, I can write the next section so the footstep scene turns into a pivotal, high-stakes moment that pushes both the romantic and mystery threads forward without resolving either. That would keep the tension perfectly balanced for your audience. The footsteps came closer, slow but certain, crunching softly over dry leaves. The firelight didn't reach far enough to see more than the black silhouettes of the trees. Claire's hand found mine, firm and urgent. "Don't move," she breathed. We stayed still, barely even breathing, as the steps stopped, just inside the treeline. Whoever or whatever it was, they were watching. I could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes. Then, just as suddenly, the sound retreated. Leaves shifted, branches swayed, and the jungle swallowed the noise completely. Claire exhaled, but it wasn't relief I heard. It was frustration. She stood, scanning the dark. "We can't just sit here and wait for whatever that is to come back." I stood too. "You want to go after it?" Her jaw tightened. "I want to know what we're dealing with." Before I could answer, a flicker of orange light appeared in the distance. Deep in the jungle, far from the beach. A fire. We stared at it, both of us realizing what it meant. Someone else was here. The hike toward it was slow and tense. The jungle at night was a maze of shadows and whispers. Branches scraped against our arms, and roots tried to trip us with every step. Claire moved ahead of me, determined, but I could tell from the stiffness in her shoulders that she was nervous. Half an hour in, we stopped. Through a break in the trees, we saw the fire, smaller than ours but tended. A figure sat beside it, hunched over something in their hands. From this distance, I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman. They weren't dressed like a fisherman or local villager. More like someone prepared to be here. Claire's grip tightened on my sleeve. "We need to go back." "What?" "We came here to—" "I know what I said." She cut in, her voice low and tense. "But if they're here on purpose, that's worse." I turned to her. You're not making sense. How can you know that? Her eyes flicked away. I just do. Something in her tone chilled me. Not fear, but certainty. We made it back to the beach without speaking. The fire was down to glowing coals, casting our shadows long and thin across the sand. Finally, I said, Claire, you're going to tell me what's going on. She dropped onto the sand, staring at the embers. Before the trip, I got a message. Anonymous. It said someone was going to follow me, that they had information about me. Information, I echoed. Her gaze finally met mine. Things I've never told anyone. Things that could end my career. The wind picked up, and for a second, the only sound was the rush of the waves. Why didn't you tell me before? I asked. Because I didn't want you looking at me differently, she said, her voice almost a whisper. And because I didn't know if I could trust you. That hit harder than I expected. You can trust me. She studied me for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if she believed that. Then she looked away. Maybe. But that fire in the jungle? I think that's who sent the message. We didn't sleep. The knowledge that someone else was here, and possibly watching us, changed everything. By morning, the sky was gray and heavy, the air thick with the promise of rain. We argued about whether to approach the stranger or move to another part of the island. Running won't fix anything, I said. And walking into a trap will? She shot back. Her voice cracked at the end, and I realized she was more scared than she wanted me to see. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I'm not letting anything happen to you. Her eyes softened just for a second, but then she pulled back. You might not get to make that choice. The rain came mid-afternoon, sudden and hard. We scrambled to cover the fire, dragging palm leaves into a makeshift shelter. The storm blurred the horizon and soaked us in minutes. Lightning flashed, and in that split second, I saw movement at the far end of the beach. A figure standing still watching us. Claire, I said, pointing. She turned, but the next flash showed nothing. The figure was gone. We stood there, water streaming down our faces, both knowing it hadn't been my imagination. This is exactly what they want, she said half to herself. Keep us tired. Keep us guessing. Then what's the plan? I asked. She hesitated. We survive. And if we have to, we disappear before they find a way to use us. Disappear? The word felt heavier than the rain soaking through my clothes. She didn't answer. She just turned back toward the jungle, her expression unreadable. And for the first time since we'd washed up on this island, I wondered if Claire was planning something I wouldn't be part of. If you want, I can now take the next section into a storm-driven confrontation where they're forced into a dangerous decision, and their fragile trust faces breaking point. That would keep both the emotional and mystery threads taut. The rain didn't let up through the night. The ocean was a dark, churning line in the distance, the jungle behind us a wall of dripping leaves and shadows. We huddled under the shelter, shivering. Claire hadn't spoken in hours. She kept glancing toward the tree-line, like she expected something, or someone, to appear. Finally, I said, if you're planning to leave me behind, just tell me. Her head snapped toward me. What? You've been somewhere else all day, thinking about disappearing. You said it yourself. That's not. She stopped, closed her eyes, and let out a shaky breath. Daniel, you don't understand. Whoever's out there, they didn't just come here for me. They came for both of us. I stared at her, the rain hammering down. Both of us? Why? Her eyes searched mine, and for the first time since we'd washed ashore, she looked like she might break. Because of something I did. Something that involved you. You didn't know, but you were part of it. My chest tightened. What are you talking about? Before she could answer, a branch snapped in the jungle. Louder than before, closer. Claire's head whipped toward the sound. Through the sheets of rain, a figure emerged. Tall, hooded, moving with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly where they were going. Claire stepped in front of me. "Stay behind me." "Not a chance," I said, moving beside her. The figure stopped a few paces away, the hood dripping water. For a moment, all I could hear was the storm. Then a low voice cut through it. "You came further than I expected." Claire's shoulders stiffened. "What do you want?" "You know what I want," the figure said. "And you know it's not just you I'm after." I took a step forward. "If this is about me, say it." The hood turned toward me. "Your last project for Whitmore and Company wasn't just numbers and charts, was it? You didn't even know you were moving money for someone else." "But she did." I looked at Claire. The rain blurred her face, but the guilt was clear. "I was trying to protect the company," she said, her voice breaking. "And you. But I made a deal I shouldn't have. They followed us here because the storm gave them the perfect chance to take what they wanted." The figure stepped closer. "You have the files, Claire. I want them. Now." Lightning lit the beach, and I saw her hand trembling at her side. "I don't have them," she said. "They're gone." The figure's voice hardened. "Then you're both useless to me." Time slowed. The wind screamed through the trees, waves crashed against the shore, and the three of us stood there. Two soaked to the bone, one cloaked in shadow. I stepped forward, putting myself between Claire and the figure. "If you want to get off this island, you'll need us. Otherwise, you're stuck here too." There was a pause. Then the figure laughed. A short, humorless sound. "Maybe. Or maybe I make sure neither of you leave." The rain drove harder, and I could feel Claire's eyes on me. "Daniel," she said, barely audible over the storm. "Don't." But I did. I moved toward the figure, my fists clenched, not sure what I was going to do until I was already doing it. The figure stepped back, and for a second, I thought they'd retreat. But then they lunged, not at me, but at Claire. She sidestepped, grabbed the coil of rope we'd found earlier, and swung it like a whip. It cracked against the figure's arm, and they stumbled. I grabbed the hood, yanking it back. A face, sharp features, piercing eyes. Someone I'd never seen before. Claire's voice cut through the chaos. "Run." We didn't stop running until we'd reached the far end of the beach, lungs burning, rain blinding. We ducked behind a rock outcrop, both gasping for breath. "Claire," I started, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice raw. "I thought I could keep you out of it. I thought I could fix it before you knew." Her words were broken, but her eyes were steady. "If we get out of this, you'll probably never want to see me again. But I need you to know, before anything else happens." She stopped, searching my face, and I realized she was on the edge of saying something that would change everything between us. That's when the shot rang out. It echoed across the beach, loud enough to drown the storm for a heartbeat. We froze. And then, slowly, Claire's expression shifted. Not fear, but something worse. "They weren't alone," she whispered. From beyond the rain and darkness, another silhouette emerged. "If you want, I can now write the final resolution scene that ties together the romantic tension and the survival stakes, leaving just enough ambiguity to keep the audience thinking after the credits. That would keep it thrilling to the very end." The second silhouette stepped into view, taller than the first, moving with deliberate calm, as though the storm was nothing more than background noise. Claire and I pressed back against the rock, the wind flattening our clothes to our skin. My pulse was hammering, but I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "Do you know them too?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes were fixed on the figure. "Not by name, but I know who they work for." The first person, the one we'd unmasked, had caught up now, dripping wet and breathing hard. "You found them," they said to the newcomer, almost relieved. The tall one stopped a few paces away. You've made this harder than it needed to be, Claire. Claire straightened despite the storm. If you wanted the files, you should have asked. But you came here to scare us into giving them up. Not scare, the tall one said. Control. Their gaze shifted to me. And you were never supposed to be part of this. I'm part of it now, I said, stepping in front of her. For a moment, no one moved. The rain hissed against the sand. Then the tall one reached into their coat and pulled out something small, metallic. My breath caught, but instead of a weapon, it was a waterproof pouch. They tossed it into the wet sand between us. Last chance. The files for your freedom. Claire didn't move. I told you they're gone. Something in the tall one's expression shifted, realization, or maybe frustration. They signaled to the first person, and both began to step back toward the jungle. I didn't trust it. Why walk away now? The tall one paused. Because the storm will finish what we started. And then they were gone, swallowed by the trees. We stayed where we were until the rain eased into a cold drizzle. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the slow return of the ocean's rhythm. Finally, Claire sank down into the wet sand, burying her face in her hands. It's over, she murmured. I knelt beside her. Not until we're off this island. Her hands fell away, and for the first time, I saw the weight she'd been carrying. The sleepless eyes, the tight line of her mouth finally softening. I didn't mean for you to get dragged into this. The files, they were proof of money laundering. I took them to protect the company, but when I realized who was involved, I hid them. They think I still have them. And you don't. She shook her head. I destroyed them, which means we're just collateral now. The honesty in her voice left no room for anger. I only felt the strange calm that comes when you've run out of ways to be afraid. We walked back to our shelter as the clouds thinned. In the distance, a faint orange glow flickered in the jungle. Maybe their campfire, maybe something else. We didn't go near it. By morning, the sky had cleared. The ocean glittered under the sun. The storm's debris scattered along the shore. Claire was already awake, scanning the horizon. There, she said suddenly, pointing. A speck. Small at first, then larger, a fishing boat heading along the coast. We ran to the waterline, waving our arms, shouting until our throats burned. The boat slowed, then turned toward us. When it was close enough, a weathered man shouted something in another language. Claire stepped forward, explaining in short, urgent bursts. He listened, his eyes flicking between us, then nodded. We climbed aboard, dripping seawater onto the deck. As the boat pulled away from the island, I looked back. The beach was empty. No sign of the two figures, no sign we'd ever been there. Just the curve of sand and the green wall of jungle. Hours later, safe in a small harbor, we sat on the edge of the pier. The sun was setting, painting the water in gold and rose. Neither of us had said much since leaving the island. You going to tell the police everything? I asked. Claire's fingers toyed with the edge of her sleeve. Some of it. Enough to keep them from coming after me or you. The rest? She let the thought trail off. I studied her profile in the fading light. So where does that leave us? She turned to me then, her expression open in a way I'd never seen in the office. I don't know, but I do know this. Out there, I wasn't your boss. I was just someone who needed you. And I still do, Daniel. Maybe more than I should. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to answer right away, but instead, I let the quiet hold us for a moment, the sound of the waves filling in what I couldn't say yet. Finally, I reached over and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We sat like that until the last light slipped behind the horizon. When we finally stood to go, I glanced one last time toward the open sea. In the distance, far beyond the harbor mouth, a faint light flickered. Steady, deliberate, like a signal. I didn't tell Claire. Some things I thought could wait until morning. But deep down, I knew the island wasn't finished with us yet. And maybe neither were they.